Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Spider-Man 3, starring Tobey Maguire, Kirsten Dunst, James Franco, Thomas Hayden Church, Topher Grace, Bryce Dallas Howard, Rosemary Harris, J.K. Simmons, and James Cromwell, and directed by Sam Raimi. Now, before I get into this movie, I want to confess I was really excited for this movie that I went to my first midnight premiere for Spider-Man 3. And how did I like it? Well, it was a crowded theater, but let's get into the review. The score by Christopher Young is every bit as bad as the movie really is, and that's showing my hand a little too early. Mary Jane's singing in this movie is bad as well. She has a terrible singing voice that at some point she gets fired from the show, rightfully so, by the way, to a dumpy singing waitress. Just a terrible arc for Kirsten Dunst. She deserves better than this, I feel like. Sure, James Franco makes a creepy villain, but not as good as performance by Mr. Franco. I'm sorry, James, but you're not as convincing as a villain. The evil goo that makes Spider-Man look like a villain is probably a good way to go to make this movie darker, but we'll get there. I know Thomas Hayden Church, from his Oscar-nominated role in Sideways. He has a story to tell later on in the film I freaking hate to this day. But I'll get there when I get there. But still, he has an arc about saving his daughter, which is an alright way to go for the movie and the character. Peter never uses his spider sense in this whole movie. Not once, and that's a problem. The fight between Peter and Harry, aka New Goblin, is just where Harry hits his head and forgets about his mission, is just terrible. Just terrible. The people working with the sand and make Sandman who he is. Am I the only one that thinks that these scientists are the worst scientists I've ever seen because they say it's a bird and it'll fly away? Just no, that is not the way the science works. You need to go out there and figure out what is going on out there. So, worst scientist ever. Peter and Mary Jane talk about the review of the show that she was in after the first scene, the one that I told you about how terrible she was as a singer, and where Peter was in the first row. She talks about herself, whereas Peter, he talks about Spider-Man, Spider-Man, Spider-Man. And Bryce Dallas Howard has a minor part as Gwen Stacy, who we'll consider seeing in the next movie as a new love interest for Peter Parker, but not in this movie. That's not till the next one. And she's here to irritate the hell out of Mary Jane at this point, especially for that upside-down kiss that they had in the first film. Eddie Brock, played by That 70s Show's Topher Grace, is very oddly cast as a villain, because he tries to be funny, but when he's supposed to be a slimy character, when he's not, he's more funny than slimy. And I'm not buying him as a villain either, especially when we get to the final fight at the end either. The Stanley cameo where he says "Nuff said" is a good little piece of cameo there. And when Mary Jane gets fired from the show, the director or producer, or whoever they were, said, "That didn't go so well." You think? This is such terrible writing. Anyways, the scene where everybody, including Mary Jane, witnessing Spider-Man kissing, and Harry himself, see Gwen Stacy kissing Spider-Man like Mary Jane and him did in the first film, like I said earlier. And the way how she overreacts is like, who was kissing her? Spider-Man or Peter? Well, come on. Is that really that stupid? Come on. She overreacted, because I think we know who kissed her. It was Spider-Man, you idiot. Mary Jane, I swear you got on my nerves. Peter finds out that Flint Marko is the person that killed Uncle Ben, is was actually just a little off. Just when we get to the end, you'll see what I mean. Spider-Man's black suit, where he does a lot of terrible things with that thing, makes him kind of a stupid. Whereas the hit, like, and not only does he hurt Flint and Mary Jane later on in the film, but he also gets Eddie Brock fired from the Daily Bugle, which I'll get to, is just the worst. Just the worst. Mary Jane comes to Harry's place and they cook and read a play that Harry wrote for Mary Jane in high school. And then the next thing you know, they're kissing. That's considered cheating. Come on, that's really cheating. Just especially when she kisses him, like, oh god, it's just horrible. It's just really freaking horrible. Harry making Mary Jane break up with Peter, just, to say there's someone else, it's just, oh, come on, Mary Jane. That's not true. Well, I know where Harry's coming from at this point, and where he says he's the other guy, and they have a fist fight. That was bad. Come on, it was an intense fight for a PG-13 rated movie, for one thing. And the way, just horrible. Horrible. And Peter making the moves on the women like it's okay when, like, okay, this is just awkward. Like, I'm scratching my head like this, like, oh god, this is so awkward. Peter playing the piano and doing all the dance moves that Mary Jane's singing waitress job, and before she starts singing, is a little god awful. And then as he hits the guy named the big security guy, whatever the hell his name is, he just punches him, and then he punches Mary Jane. Like, yeah, I would ask the same thing as she asked in the movie. Who are you? You're not the same person I like anymore, Peter, you little dick. And yeah, it's just infuriating to me. And now Peter is trying to get rid of the black suit. And Eddie Brock, like I told you earlier, got fired earlier in the movie. And oh my god, he became Venom, one of the weakest movie villains of this whole series. He's supposed to be a strong character, but here he was very much a weak character with very little to do. Just, oh, come on. When I look at this actor, Topher Grace, it makes me think that he's acting like Eric Foreman from the 70s show more than the character he's supposed to play. And that's been a problem from the moment I saw the movie. As the fight between Spider-Man versus the Sandman and Venom begin, he asks for Harry's help, like, do you really need his help? Because it doesn't look like much. But yeah, they had that fist fight as I brought up earlier in the film, and Harry's face was scarred, and he's pissed at him, and Bill Paxton's father comes up to him and says that the glider was the one that hurt Norman Osborn, aka Willem Dafoe, in that first film, is a little off for me, because it's like, you're waiting till now to say something all these years later? Come on, give me a break. And Harry dying in this movie was rather too laughable than just like Venom hates all the loud noises. Come on, that's really laughable. And plus that story that Sandman says at this point where he said he killed Uncle Ben was an accident. Yeah, oh, come on. That's not really supposed to be an accident, especially if you have a gun on you. And why do you need to put that storyline in this movie? I don't understand. Why is the Sandman the villain who he says that this was an accident? Come on, that's not... Like, I don't want to get into any more details. It's just ridiculously retarded. And the movie ends with the melodramatic note that I think there is a good reason why they rebooted it in the first place. But yeah, this is probably one of the worst Spider-Man films I've seen in maybe at all. We'll see when we get to the rebooted with Andrew Garfield, but we'll see. And now it's time for the rating. I'll give this movie a 3.9 out of 10. And I can't believe this is how this series ended. And they rebooted it all over again with Andrew Garfield. And just one of my favorite trilogies. Just, it's my personal favorite superhero. Just to have two down is just the worst. So I'll be back next week to review The Amazing Spider-Man. And until next time, with great power comes great responsibility.